Dr. Curtis, hi. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Judith.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Judy Plotz, Chief Customer Officer for SupportLogic. And today I am joined by Dr. Hui-Curtis, CEO and founder of SupportU. Dr. Curtis and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other for a number of years. We both entered the CC Women Hall of Fame as the original inductees, and we have built a wonderful relationship since then. So I'm really glad that you're with us today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Would you take a couple of minutes and share with the audience a little bit about your background and how you came to travel this journey to land at SupportU?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, like many of us, we never really intended to be in kind of call center operations and stuff. So, in college, I took a part-time job in a call center, and I think I lasted 4 months. I didn't know what this thing was, and it was just weird. And I had the opportunity, like 2 years later down the road, to go back into a call center, but as a supervisor. And I thought, how interesting, figuring out how to manage people, but tethered to the phones. And so, and I ended up really enjoying the environment. And so through the years, I just kind of continued to work myself up into the call center, working a variety of different positions, kept moving up. And then I thought, is this a fluke, or was it really me being successful? And so I decided to really continue to switch jobs, and so every 3 to 4 years, I would switch different industries to see if the success was me or just happened to be the environment. So I had great exposure to a variety of different industries. And quite a few years ago, I had the opportunity and that led to leading a lot of great teams of varying sizes, both domestic and international, as small as 50 to upwards of 2,000 plus. And most recently, I had the opportunity to lead an entire company, but on the BPO side. And I've worked with outsourcers, but I've never been on that side. And so I had a lot of my friends that are like, don't go to the other side. It's the dark side. But honestly, it was a perspective that I've never done. So I thought it was an interesting challenge, but found myself working with a great leadership team. We transitioned well. We doubled in size. And shortly after that, I decided to kind of venture out on my own and wanted to build a company the way that I wanted to build it myself, and saw kind of a greater purpose and wanted to build something more meaningful. And so here I am today.
That's phenomenal. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Tell me about the more meaningful part, because I know in conversations that we've had in the past, one of the most meaningful things to you are your employees. Is that what you mean by more meaningful, that you wanted a different way to lead your employees and your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, especially in our industry, there's so many like really cool buzzwords, right? And so first, it was customer experience. Now it's employee experience. And people talk conceptually about employee experience, but I really wanted the opportunity and had the fortune to really be able to kind of define and build an entire company around employee experience. So as I was planning on building the company from the ground up, it was entirely built with the employee experience in mind. And so as we're defining and figuring out how we're going to build our technology stack and defining our processes and workflows, it was built with the employees in mind. And so as we were vetting out and demoing, products and resources, if it wasn't going to help the employees onboard and be successful and work themselves to being productive and transition well into our company culture, then we didn't implement it. And so everything really is focused around the employees. And so if they have a really good transition into my company, into our culture, and they're happy and they understand how their success translates into our customer success, and they're taken care of and they're well taken care of, then that retention returns to how we're successful in the long term. And
Right.
so that was just an ability for me to really kind of define and build a company kind of the right way, or at least the way that I saw fit.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, for people who are with us today and listening, so you had a fortunate event that you were building from the bottom up, right? So
Mhm.
you could choose the software and you could say, yes, it makes the cut. No, it doesn't make the cut. What about for an executive who's in the company? The software's been there forever, right?
Mhm.
Everything's kind of built. What would be like the number one or number two thing if they're really, thinking hard about their employee experience, and knock on wood, I hope they are. What could they do if they can't build it themselves? They've inherited, they're not going to be making tech changes. Do you have any advice for somebody in a position like that?
Yeah, it's always hard because everything seems kind of born there, right? Everybody becomes institutionalized and stuff. And part of it is I'm a huge risk taker. And when you come into organizations, you have to be able to and be willing to kind of evaluate and be willing to kind of change either the product or the processes and the workflows, right?
Right.
Um, but understand kind of what your ultimate objectives are. If your objective is to really improve customer experience, then you have to be able to understand and take your resources and make sure it fits what you're trying to achieve. And if
Hmm.
it doesn't, then you have to be willing to change out those resources. And is it going to be painful? Absolutely. Is it going to take some resources up front? Absolutely. But think about your long-term game, right? Because once you do it right up front, then you're going to net out the benefits, down the road. And
Right.
so, you know, doing the right thing is never going to be easy, but it's
Yeah,
worth it.
it is worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like what you mentioned too. I think one of the critical pieces is in the onboarding. I've seen so many organizations have beautiful employee experience programs, but onboarding is not part of that.
Right.
And so that first taste that you're getting, they may not stay with you long enough to get to all these other beautiful programs you built because the onboarding wasn't hitting the mark. Um, so I like that you mentioned that specifically as well. Let's talk a little bit about AI. And there's no conversation that can be had right now in this industry without talking about AI. What are you seeing, since you are, truly running a BPO that's helping other customers, manage their businesses, support their businesses? What are you seeing AI's impact on customer support is today?
Yeah, from our view, I think the items that we used to do before was really manual, right? It was kind of the things that we used to do. We used to kind of manhandle a lot, and now as technology started getting better, it got a little easier. But I wouldn't say that as practitioners we were necessarily adept at understanding how to use the technology.
Hmm.
And so now slowly practitioners are now getting more accustomed to how to leverage that technology. And so now it's mirroring. Now we're getting more used to the technology, understand the capabilities and functionalities. And now we're understanding, okay, now that we have it and we're starting to understand it, now how do we really leverage it to be more efficient or more strategic? And I'll use support logic for as an example, right? It's you guys are taking some kind of the fundamental concepts of support, and I'll use QA because I'm super passionate about QA and stuff. And you guys are doing some phenomenal things in terms of like automating it and using AI and making it so much easier to be able to capture insights and being proactive with the information and going one step above, but actually doing something with it.
Right.
Versus before, we had to have a human being be smart enough to understand the data points and figuring out, okay, now with the data points, what do you do with it?
Hmm.
And so it's just come leaps and bounds from kind of where we were, but you have to let the technology do its work.
Right.
And now using it to really fundamentally kind of shift the way you run your call center and now reap the benefits of it.
Hmm. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason I wanted to join Support Logic a couple of years ago, because I felt like the technology was something that would obviously, change the way
Oh
that
yeah.
people delivering support. Um, and that was just before the big rush, just
Yeah.
before the big waves have come in, right? But I still see this software as something that first off, it can take so much out of the stack that customers have, but it can put so much goodness in, right? And it can actually make people's days so much better. And, how could you go wrong with software that can do that?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about, where else, especially in support, we're inundated with thousands of millions of transactions, right? And
Hmm.
oftentimes our jobs are so reactionary that we
Yeah.
just don't, we barely have enough time to eat lunch.
Yeah.
And so when you think about the challenges of leading organizations like that, you know, you don't have much time to really kind of sit down and much less analyze data. And so being able to have a tool that's going to allow you to do that much, much easier, it's going to give you a lot of time back into your day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about um, something that's near and dear to your heart and my heart. Being a woman in this industry, you're a woman CEO, and you've cracked that glass ceiling. You've broken through that. That's very not something often seen in the support world,
Sure.
quite frankly. You are a fierce advocate for women. You're a fierce advocate for the Asian community. What are, any pieces of advice or wisdom that you would give to a woman looking at you saying, I want to be like Dr. Curtis?
Well, I would say everybody has their own paths, right? And if it's something really important to you, make the time. So whether it's goals to continue to climb the corporate ladder, or whether it's to continue to build important relationships or friendships, or whether it's to go back and get that degree, whatever it is, just go do it. I tell people all the time, it's like, look, you're you can impact the quality of your life, but you can't control the time that you have in your life. Like, I'm not guaranteed that I have tomorrow or next week or next month, but I can control what I do today or within my day. And so with women, and I'm really big on mentorship, and I'm really big on building connections, because there's so many people out there that, like yourself, Judy, it's like whenever I have problems, whenever I have questions, I know I can text you or I can call you, and you're great about giving advice and guidance that, many times we can't do it alone.
Hmm.
And so build yourselves I call it my little advisory board, and seek help and seek support, because you're going to need that throughout your life. And whether it's for personal reasons or professional reasons, um, get that support group, but just go out and do it.
Yeah.
Even if you're afraid, even if you're hesitant, just go out and do it. Like I said, it's, n- nothing is ever easy, but you'll be glad you did it.
Hmm.
And for me, especially in the Asian community, it was surprising for me to find out that even though we're one of the model minorities and we're one of the larger minorities, we have the least amount of representation at the executive level. And that was concerning for me, which is
Yeah.
why I got involved locally with our Asian community to really kind of help the younger generation build those leadership skills. Like, how do we help, our young Asian career minded, young men and women learn how to be better leaders in the future to help them get to those executive levels.
Right.
So, long-winded answer, but if it's something important to you, go make the time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I do think you come preloaded with like 30-hour days. I do think that, you have that because I've known you, and I see you on LinkedIn, and it amazes me how much you're capable of doing. It really does. And it's very, very impressive. Which takes us to our next topic, which is, tied to this. In addition to all that you do, you have 5 amazing children,
Yes,
right?
I do.
How has being a mom, and we're just going to talk about it, and we talk about this sometimes, right? We should talk about some of the stuff that we know people are wondering, right? How did you do all of that balancing? And how do you continue to do all of that balancing?
Yeah, I would say, early on when the kids were young, I wasn't climbing the corporate ladder. My husband and I, we always kind of split the parenting duties, pretty 50-50. He's always been the breadwinner for quite a long time. And so in the beginning of my career, we had one kid and then we had two kids. And my husband's all like, well, that's great, but your job really is just paying daycare. So he knew I didn't have the temperament to be a stay-at-home mom, and he never would have pushed that. But he's like, but fundamentally, we have to do something, So whether you stay home with the kids or, go make more money, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go make more money. I'll go get promoted somewhere. And so I did. And so I switched jobs, got promoted, and really kind of focused more on you know, figuring out kind of what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go in my career and stuff. And then like every 3 years, I got kind of burnt out, and so that's when we started having kids, and which is why my kids are like 3 years apart.
Right.
Um, and so that really kind of brought balance into my life because I couldn't work 60-hour days type of thing. Um, and so at the time, I was like middle management because it was enough for me to balance that. Plus, my kids were always a priority. And it wasn't until they were a little bigger that I was a little bit more aggressive with my career. And my husband was always, did well in his career. So, I always tell people it's like there's not a timing thing. It's like you don't miss a window to be a manager, director, VP, whatever it is.
Mm.
Your time will come and you'll know when it's right.
Yeah.
And even whatever level you decide to do, like being a parent was always important to us. I would have my neighbors, I would post on LinkedIn, I'm flying back from Australia. And I would just, I would jump off of a plane from Australia and go to my son's marching band competition, because that's what we do as
Yeah,
parents.
for sure.
And so you just figure out and balance it. And I had the luxury of really kind of defining my travel, and I would just schedule it around my kids' activities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. I think, your point in all of that is your time will come. Just make sure you're ready when it comes, right?
Yeah,
Because as you said, right, you can always be building, always be learning, always be doing, but be ready because, maybe when the kids do reach a certain age and you can change roles, change industries, even if that's what's of interest. But don't think it all has to be linear and,
right.
you go from thing to thing and it's just natural because it's not, right?
It's not. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to ask you one last question and then we're going to say goodbye to each other for today.
Sure.
Um, you're someone that inspires many, many people, and we see it when we're together at Sandy's CC Women events and the CCW conference.
Yeah.
Um, take take 30 seconds, a minute. Tell me who's inspired you recently.
It's interesting because most people try to think about some public figure or some author or whatever it is, and recently I had the luxury of going on a little mini vacation with a good friend of mine, Casey Taluli, and she's a senior director over at Marriott. And the more time I spend with Casey, I am always incredibly amazed at her story, the adversity that she has come from, and the things that she has had to overcome in her life is just incredible. Like I don't know how she's been able to bounce back from such an interesting past, and you would never know because if and when you meet her disposition is so bright and so bubbly, and she is so positive and such a force to be reckoned with, and she is so good at her job that you would just never know she has such kind of a path and a road that she had, that she's traveled. And so
Yeah.
I'm always duly impressed with it. And so just when I think I've had certain kind of journeys, she by far overshadows everything. And
No.
so she really just continues to encourage me, and she's a great cheerleader for me. She's a great sounding board for me, and she encourages me and motivates me in more ways than she will ever know.
That's amazing. I know Casey, and I smile when you talk about her because I smile every time I see her, and I think of her beautiful smile that she shares with us.
Yes.
She is one heck of a woman. I agree with you. So thank you so very much for spending time with me today. I've enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully, we will be seeing each other in person very soon. I look forward to that, and it's been a pleasure having you.